Welcome to APA Wisconsin's video series, where we interview our great people from around the state to share valuable stories with you. I am Jason Gilman, APA President. Today it is my privilege to introduce to you Charlie Handy, County Planner and Community Development Manager with La Crosse County. Charlie has over 30 years experience in both city and county planning, a degree from University of Wisconsin-Madison with a strong background in construction, physical engineering, and urban planning. Charlie also has significant experience with land conservation, farmland preservation, and an ability to encourage people to participate in public engagement.
Charlie, it's a great privilege to interview you today after all the years I've known you.
We've done at La Crosse County any number of things, as most planning departments do, within economic development, farmland preservation, land use, things like that. I'm really passionate about providing access to diverse populations. It's really important to me, and trying to gather that public input, try to gather what people have to say. There's so many different populations, and even things that can't really advocate for themselves. So conservation and the land doesn't really advocate for itself. So our staff, that's really important to our staff.
How have you seen in your career evolution interests change over time from the standpoint of what the general community hold as important?
Yeah, wow, that's such a kind of an ebb and flow over time. As far as conservation and the passion for the land and the land ethic, I think that's actually increased over time. I think we're in a spot right now where we can really utilize that passion that's out there for climate action and things like that to improve the situation for conservation. It's really important for people to feel empowered to make a difference. So I think that's a big part of it. But I also think, one of the things in La Crosse County that we have is we have the Coon Creek watershed, one of the first watershed projects in the country. When you go and talk to those landowners, their grandpa knew about conservation and their dad knew about conservation. Well, you start to build those layers of education and conservation ethic, which we've done in this country pretty well, and they start to really pay off over time.
Are you getting a sense from the community that there are certain factors, part of climate, that they're more focused on?
Yeah, and I think it depends a little bit too on the personal interest, but obviously rainfall and hydrology and the frequency of flooding events is a big deal here. Right on the Mississippi, it's very visible, but also invasive species management.
How would you say your career has grown over time?
Well, I think, it's a small planner's world. We have a lot of connections, people that we know, social interactions, and that just keeps getting more and more because there's just more and more planners around because people have realized the importance of our profession. So I think, the growth just in our profession itself has been something that I've really enjoyed because that social interaction is always so important, and telling each other stories. And I was in a meeting 2 days ago, and one of the young ladies that was a planner in the meeting talked about an issue in La Crosse. We've got the North-South Corridor issue, and that started in 1979. And I said to her, well, you say that like it's a long time ago. And she said, well, it's the year I was born. So yeah, it's really interesting how it doesn't sound that long ago to me, but for her, that's her entire life.
Yeah. So what do you think APA could do better to make it more friendly to planners that are dealing with both urban and rural?
I think the APA does a pretty good job of that, of thinking about all of the different subjects. I mean, healthcare is obviously very important in the rural world, just as it is in the urban world and things like that. So I guess as long as there's representation on the APA, whether it be in the board or in the people that are electing the board, things like that, the people that are planning the conferences, knowing what's relevant, some thought process, and Yeah, I'm a member of the Wisconsin County Planning Directors Group, and we're always asked by the APA to give ideas. I think the one thing that maybe is a little bit missing is respect for the towns in Wisconsin. It's a difficult thing to deal with, having something like 1,800 towns in the state and being what we call a small box state with those towns. But that's the government that we have. And so for people like myself who are working in county government, we need to work with the towns and we need to know the issues that the towns are dealing with.
I wanted to ask you about how planners might better address social and cultural needs.
Probably the most difficult thing for us as planners is we have to respect the policymakers that we have, that have been elected, and sometimes they're not as a diverse a population as the people that we represent,
Right.
or the people that they represent. And so we've got to remember that, we've got to remind them of that. That's an education process. But at the same time, we still have to deal with them as the policymakers, and their decision-making is really important. So that's kind of that difficult balance of making sure that the policy reflects the people that it's representing. 90-some% of our commuters are driving in their own single occupancy vehicle to work. That some people can't afford a vehicle, or can't afford the insurance, or can't afford the gas, but need public transit. And so we, especially in these areas of Wisconsin, invest inordinate amounts of money in building new roads and making those roads beautiful and fast and providing the best access on those roads. But at the same time, we're not spending enough money on transit, and we're not spending enough money on those other issues of access that provide that access to people who have different needs.
Where do you think the greatest impending opportunities will be, and how can planners engage in those areas?
So, one of the things that we've been looking at quite a bit is autonomous vehicles. Will that change transportation? Will it come in quickly, or will it take time, to roll in? Cell phones rolled in pretty quick, right? And if you go back in the day, electricity rolled in pretty quick to our communities. So we might have been caught a little bit behind the 8 ball in a couple of different times historically. We might all have an AI support staff. How will that affect policy making? How will that affect elections? How will that affect public access? I mean, look at the difference now between the number of people we can get access to get their opinions for those public input sessions, for surveys, and et cetera, because of Microsoft Teams or Zoom calls or things like that. It's a very different world than it was even 5 or 10 years ago.
How do you think experienced planners can better, mentor or bring, help inexperienced planners get into the field and get passionate about it?
Well, I think we got to start early. I really think curriculum in elementary school, middle school, high school. We do a planning curriculum every year with the 7th graders at it's now Logan Middle School. And it's a class around 100 kids, 3 or 4 classes, I should say, of around 100 kids. And the teachers are great. They ask us to come back every year, even patient with us. First of all, it's so much fun for us to get to see 7th graders and that different level of energy. As far as mentoring planners and young planners, I always go back to that conversation about that son that's taken over the dad's farm, and the dad has farmed it this way for so many years. Well, at this point in my career, I've planned a certain way for so many years, and I've got a couple of younger planners in the office that are taking that over. And we've got a new county planner, and we've got a new community development specialist. And I got to understand that they're going to plan different than I did. And I've got to pretty much respect what they've learned so far in their careers, who they are, where they're at, what their passions are, and kind of let them go. Thank you so much for the interview today again and all your time. And
One of the last questions I've been asking all of the planners that have participated in this program is about artificial intelligence, and we've been hearing a lot about it, that we're entering what people are referring to as the augmented age, that every one of us will have this smart assistant.
I think it can be a wonderful tool. I mean, if you go back to some of the discussions that early on in conservation, we did a lot of hydrology design, and that if any of you remember how we used to draw topo lines, we would get these points on the paper, and those points would be maybe 10 feet apart. Well, then you measure 10 equidistant points between those, and you draw a line connecting all, and it looked like a rough topo line. Well, computers do that so easily now, and the formulas that we use for hydrology, so if they're all programmed in, most of the kids don't even know what those programs are anymore. They don't need to, right? So AI is going to be the same thing. I really look forward to it. I think it's going to, and I think it's going to happen fast.
Okay, so Charlie, I wanted to just ask you about just actual planning project. What could you tell me about, maybe a project or two that you've worked on that you really enjoyed?
So I think the latest farmland preservation plan for La Crosse County, the process, of gathering public input and things like that is always interesting. You have workshops, and you have now you have Zoom meetings and et cetera. But the input that we received from the ag landowners, so much more accurate than any other data analysis or anything that we receive. It's so much easier to plan when you've got good information and good data. And I thought that process just worked out really well because we had such good participation from the landowners and also then good data.
Charlie, I want to thank you so much for your time and your contribution to APA Wisconsin. It's been a privilege and pleasure getting to interview you today, and thanks so much for all your thoughtful answers too. And so stay tuned for more APA videos.